Welcome back. The show's called Brand Equity, and I'm Sonali Krishna. Terry Peigh, Managing Director and Senior Vice President at IPG, was recently in India to share the findings of the New Realities global study on how new media is impacting consumer decision-making. New Realities has covered 6 countries, namely India, China, Brazil, America, Russia and Germany. One of the key learnings being that today's consumers are demanding more and more from manufacturers and marketers. I caught up with Terry to get a sense of what the research brought to the fore and what this means for marketers. Take it away. Thank you so much for joining us, Terry. Truly a pleasure to have you on Brand Equity.
Thank you.
Just to give me some perspective on this New Realities research that you spearhead, this is the second time that you're actually, researching the Indian realities in terms of, what the middle class is going through?
Right. We started this research 5 years ago in China and the U.S. as a bit of a test market, and it was so successful that we've since added several countries. We have Brazil, India, China, U.S., England, and now Russia. And this is the second wave of research that we've done in India, so we have terrific results, very interesting results, and how the Indian consumer is changing as to how they go about making decisions for products.
So this difference that you see, let's say 2 years ago, when you actually did your maiden research in India for the middle class, and 18 months, 2 years hence, what dramatic change have you actually seen?
Perhaps the most significant change we've seen in India is the Indian consumer is looking to use media channels, and by media I use that term loosely. They're using information channels that are trusted and objective and very independent. So they're looking to friends and families. They're looking to product reviews by experts. They're looking for product reviews by other friends and associates on the web.
So I'd really like to understand from you, when you say that you're looking at the middle class across these 6 countries that you've mentioned, if you could tell me what you see as, defining differences between, let's say, the middle class of India as opposed to, let's say, the middle class of the West, because they're so vastly diverse and different.
Yeah, we rely greatly on economists who have laid out very strict criteria as to what defines it. And obviously it is different. The middle class in New York is very different than the middle class in Mumbai. And often they lay out criteria that has to do with ownership of certain things. What we see, in particular in China, and a little bit less so here, is as people emerge into the middle class, there's often a search for brands that help them declare their status as a middle-class person. The phrase we have in the States is keeping up with the Joneses. People look at what kind of shoes one wears, what kind of car one drives, their neighbor, and they want to often emulate that in order to establish themselves as having risen up to a new status. That's a very prevalent characteristic in China.
And in India?
In India, we see that as well. Not as dominant as in China, but we see it in India as well. So we found it to be a fairly common characteristic of the movement into the middle class, that people will often grab those major symbols, those major brands, often premium brands, and attach themselves to them so that they can, in essence, kind of declare that.
Terry, I asked you this question of differentiation between middle classes across the globe only because of this really the standout number that your research has presented, which is 87% of Indian consumers you say are looking at product information and looking at reliable information through different sources. I find that very hard to believe, simply because I don't think that our middle class is that sophisticated to actually be so adept with actually figuring out which place they should actually get reliable information from. So when you say 87% of Indian middle class, that is a really peculiar number.
Actually, the 87% refers to 87% of all the Indians we interviewed said that they're demanding more from products today. So that's where the 87% comes from. 87% of Indians saying they're demanding more from products today. So we don't really break it down from middle class versus upper versus lower. And to be counted there, they have to say that I want more from products today than ever before, which is just an interesting characteristic that people are saying, companies can't just sit back on their laurels and market to them the old way. You've got to come at them with I think a better product, better delivery of message.
I had another query which I thought was interesting. In your research, it shows particularly about India. So when you say continued low levels of confusion and frustration, what is interesting is that the data shows that India records high levels of frustration and confusion compared to, let's say, its peer countries. but it's also the country that comes out as the smartest compared to any other.
Yes.
Isn't that a contradiction by itself?
Well, there's still, while India is a touch higher than some of the other countries, it's still very, very low in terms of frustration and confusion. So it's as it's higher, it's just a tad bit, but relative to the scale, it's still, people are not confused. What's interesting about the Indian consumer, and this came out in the research, is that the Indian consumer, amongst all the countries in the world, is most likely to find great value and in satisfaction from helping people and having product knowledge. So there's clearly something in the Indian culture that says, I as a consumer like to have that product knowledge relative to other countries in the world. That tells me that I should help feed them information to increase that satisfaction and to increase their likelihood of becoming an advocate and a brand ambassador. The fascinating statistic that we talk about in our presentation, 6% of online complaints are responded to. So you have 94% of the world out there saying, how come no one's talking to me? And their anger becomes magnified. And what do? They tell their friends and families. And the magnification of the problem continues.
Thank you so much, Terry. Truly
Thank
a
you.
pleasure speaking with you, and have a good trip.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.